Hello and welcome. As the intro stated, this is the As Bold as Lions podcast. And I've been using that intro for this whole time now. We are in I think this is episode 65. Just checking my notes here, but 65 episodes into this podcast adventure. And I've been using that intro the whole time. I don't think I'll ever change it because I love those voices so much. I can go back and listen to that all the time. It's my wife and my wife and kids. It's 4 boys, and they're all clearly audible there with their line. But if you ever go back, the very beginning of that, you may just note a baby kind of crying or wailing, and that is my daughter. She's like, almost 3 now, but she's just added her little bit of contribution to the podcast. I think it was kind of by accident because I was recording these, and when you have a little baby in the house, there at any time there might be some crying going on. So she's on there too. I think the only thing I might change at some point with that intro is to get her to say "As Bold as Lions" at some point. But that's maybe the only update I'll make. Don't know why I mentioned all that. Just wanted to, just banter a little bit here and explain just some random point that probably doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on your life. But anyway, my name is Derek, and I usually mention at the end of my episodes, but I wanted to say right up the top, my email is info@derekcharlesjohnson.com. If you ever want to drop me a line about anything mentioned today, something from another episode, just life in general, prayer request, please do that. Any comments you may have as well. I'm always open to some feedback, and that's encouraged and appreciated. So we're culminating and finishing off this whole series called Living Behind Enemy Lines. Had some alliteration in these titles. The first one was Recognize the Battle. Last time was Realize the Call. And today is Ready for Action. Some R words there. Today was a little bit hard to come up with a good one, but Ready for Action. I think that's the best I can do. I hope these have been helpful for you. The first week going into this, I just kind of stated, hey, going into 2022, I was drawn to this title, Living Behind Enemy Lines. Just the title, that's it. Didn't know how to flesh it out much more than that. And as I sat on that idea for a while, God just in his grace and in his timing just kind of brought some things together. And over the course of just a few days, just kind of scripted out these podcasts and then go in and record them and get them uploaded and scheduled out and ready to go. Usually trying to work ahead just so I'm not always doing it all at the last minute. So we've just to set some stage for the context of where this podcast has been this year. We've been in the book of James, discussing some Christian character and conduct, and I think that's just kind of foundational and good to do. We looked at some profiles of courage, profiles in courage from Scripture, give us some guidance, help us navigate life with a faith-informed worldview. And then there was kind of a trilogy of episodes where talked about a world on fire and then praying for America. Feel like those just kind of all were of the same tone and bend, and that God was leading me to share those together. Then did something for Easter and Holy Week, and now we are finishing up this series. And not quite sure where we're going next, but stay tuned because we'll maybe take a little bit of a turn. Been doing a lot of heavy stuff, but I hope it's been helpful for you. Because I think these are some necessary things. Looking at how to live as believers, I think we have to take seriously the idea that Israel lived under Egypt as slaves. They lived in Babylon as exiles. We can use our lives in a way that glorify and honor God, even amongst a pagan and godless culture. It's an exciting time. It can be scary if we choose to focus on that. But instead, let us keep our focus on Christ because he's doing something. He's up to something in our world. Hebrews 12, verse 1 and 2, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every heavy weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. As we move into some more practical ways to live today, I want to preface this saying that these are obviously all my own thoughts, and you may disagree at a certain point, and I'm open to having some differing opinions on some of these things. But I think we find unity in the gospel. We talked about that last time, majoring on the majors. And that sometimes just the differences that we may have in all this is just the implementation of them, how we choose to act upon what we've been given and the knowledge that we have. So again, just rapid fire going through some things and more of a brief commentary on each point because I want to cover as much as possible here. I think being ready for action means that we know how to act and we know what to do. And if we are in exile, if we're in, I don't want to say bondage, but we're in a period where we're under some wicked authority and godlessness, how does that then affect our daily life? If we're amongst a predominantly growing, or certainly growing pagan culture, how do we live as a believer? And today, these are just some thoughts on that, to kind of take action with that. Part of what I have felt lacks a little bit in our sermons, in our preaching, maybe it's been growing this way, but it just seems like a lot of it now, is that we don't want our messages to be too bold to the point where it's like, here's the clear-cut decisions you need to make, and because you're a Christian, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Like we want to hear the message that says we should be doing some things that are good, but we don't actually want to hear what some of those things are and to be specifically told. And I don't know where that point changed in our Christian culture, because I think at some point it did, or it just started to become less of a, here's some things you should do if you're a Christian. And it became more of, let's try to reach the culture, so let's not be so heavy-handed with some of these things. I kind of swing it back to people need to be told a little bit more. People need to be instructed a little bit more, because they don't, as Christians, we don't always just naturally come to that. If we're not in our Bibles and in prayer at any point besides what we are exposed to on Sundays, we're not just going to naturally stumble upon things that we should be doing. And so that's maybe, to preface this, and before we go into any of this, that's maybe already something that kind of rubs you the wrong way. But that's my opinion, is that we've allowed our preaching to maybe be too safe in some aspects, in some regard, and that we do need to be calling out some things, because we're facing things now because we haven't been as what's the word? I guess we haven't been as direct or just as intentional as we could be on certain aspects. And I think Jesus was. I think we can look at him. We can look at the apostles. They set some standards, and it was walked out. So here are some things to consider as we are ready for action, living behind enemy lines. First point is to be fruitful and multiply. Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Very simply, as a believer, get married, have kids, raise a family. It's biblical. It's basically God's first main command to Adam and Eve, and I think it still applies. We aren't told to stop having kids because the world looks bad. All the more we should consider that. And I've thought about this. I don't know if you have, but a pagan lifestyle is focused in and of itself. And how does a culture that aborts its young and encourages sexual deviance, how does that culture continue to advance and promulgate itself? Doesn't it die out at some point because it runs itself into extinction? I would say so. So if we're on this side having kids, raising families, and the rest of the world is kind of just doing its own thing and petering out, I think we're going to advance and take more ground because the fact that we're multiplying and we're increasing and we're doing what we're told to do by the Lord. Some other topics to consider on this: attend a sound Bible-believing church that's with your family. Assess where the schools are at in your area and the pluses and minuses of your kids attending public or private school or homeschool. That's something that I think a lot of people need to consider right now, and just look at the state of the education systems where they live. Some of them may be okay. Some may be sort of a lost cause. It just depends where you're at. And so that is one of those things to just kind of apply to your own life and figure out. So be fruitful and multiply. Secondly, store up treasure in heaven. Matthew 16:19 through 21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Whatever the next few months and years might bring, we know from Scripture that the end times are going to be a time of great trial and turmoil for many. And money could be tight. We may feel a pinch for various resources. We even see right now where the dollar does not go as far as it used to. We can be honest about that. There's a lot of things going on affecting our money. But I believe God is still going to provide for those who do not compromise the faith or his name. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. We live under a nation of evil leadership, people that make bad laws and they issue bad decrees. And we sometimes feel the effect of those things because we live here. But we have to understand that still we serve God. We ultimately appeal to his authority in our lives. And because of that, we are storing up treasure ultimately in heaven. Be as generous as possible in this life, and however that looks for you. It's easy to just hoard and say, I need this and I've got to survive, and to go into that mode. But what God might be giving you to bless others with could be important if you come before him with hands extended and open, rather than just looking to see what you can grab and keep under yourself. That's a reminder for me as much as anybody here. And just to know that your generosity may be a thing that God uses to show someone else who he is. So store up treasures in heaven. Next point, whenever possible, cut ties to things that are anti-God, anti-Christ. Ephesians 5:11, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. I guess, I let this point kind of speak for itself. To just suffice to say, there are things I think we need to stop supporting as much as possible as we have the means, and especially as it relates to our wallets, talking about money again. Some things are hard, and I get that. And this whole point really requires some discernment on our parts individually to decide what this looks like for us. But to avoid shopping certain places, to avoid supporting maybe some bigger corporations and things that we're not really sure what their ties are. Who and what, and most importantly, how to disconnect from those things is up to the individual believers. Who to disconnect from, what things to stop supporting with our wallets, and how do you do that? How is the big question. Like if I usually shop here and, they're becoming more and more progressive and they're unabashedly saying this is what we support and we support this and we're not for the things of God, I can think of one big company that is getting more and more progressive, and in its foundings, as far as I can know and relate, the man who founded this company was a very solid believer, very outspoken patriot, and just that his through the years, what has happened to his company is it has just increasingly moved more and more to this progressive, very woke, very just all these things. So becoming more anti-God, anti-Christ in its approach to the world. And we have to understand, our money, anything that we buy is basically a vote for that thing and what it stands for. Sometimes I need to be reminded that, like, if I buy this from here, I'm supporting something else that they then support. And some of those things we wouldn't normally just give that money to somebody because we wouldn't agree with it. We, especially from an entertainment perspective, some of those things. And then that money is then given over to darker, more sinister things. And kind of this whole idea of following the money, where does a dollar that you spend at this, let's just say at this theme park, where does that then go from there to what they then support and what they are standing for? So, without saying a lot of names and like I said at the beginning, I think we need sometimes some more directive type of approach to what we're about, if we're Christians, and almost sometimes need to be told that a little bit more, because when we leave it up to the individual, we don't always get there. And I'm not going to go further with calling things out, but to say that whenever possible, we try to cut those ties. What can you cut out of your life right now that is not essential? That's something that I can look back at these last 2 years. And if there's one good thing that came out of what has happened, what we've all gone through, it's been kind of this peeling away of what is important and what doesn't really matter and what I can live without because life came to a standstill for a certain period of time. And I realized, hey, I don't really need to do that. One thing for me is just movies. I haven't gone to a lot of movies in the last couple years, and I just haven't missed it. I guess maybe that's weird. There haven't been maybe a lot of movies I've really wanted to see anyway, but and even movies, just as you have an opportunity to watch things at home or things that you can rent or stream or whatever, it's just the whole desire for it has sort of taken a back seat. That's just me. That's just one thing. I think there's great wholesome movies out there, and we should be giving our vote and our money towards, because it probably is kingdom building. But there's some other ones where it's just like, you know what? I don't miss it, and I don't really know where that dollar goes when I go and watch that or support that anyway. So I'm kind of leery of just always handing that over without doing a little further gut check on that, I guess you could say. So, next point is to pray and vote. Proverbs 29 verse 2, when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. Love that verse. There's been a lot of groaning lately. There's been wicked rule, and we have seen some of the darkest days in our land. And some I know say, well, Christianity and politics, that's a bad mix. Shouldn't really should stay out of it if you're Christian. I tend to disagree. I think we avoid political discussions to our own peril. If we would talk more directly about the importance of our vote and even how to vote as believers, I think we could implement some lasting real change. Again, getting back to just telling people how it is and telling them like it is. And what kind of world are we going to give to our kids? I think about that a lot as a parent. Is there a world that they're even going to have to inherit? Just as your money is a vote, your vote is a vote. That's kind of self-explanatory, right? But don't expect to have Christ-honoring or God-honoring policies to come out of a leader who is clearly anti-God and anti-Bible based upon his or her actions. Can't always just go off of the campaign promises they make or the sound bites that are there, and you think, wow, they quoted a really cool Bible verse or something, and they made an appeal to somebody through that. You've got to look at what's their record. What are the things that they have done in the other levels of leadership that they've been in up to that point, and that you can pretty much go off of that to see what's going to be reflected if they were to get into a position. There is a lot coming up in November this year. And I think it's another big election. We say this every year, it seems like, but I think this is one where we either maybe turn a corner a little bit with where things are headed, or we just kind of keep down this path. And I know some people say, well, it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat, red or blue, they're all bad. Well, then I think we pray for God to do two things: to raise up some good leaders that are not just insiders and part of the whole club that's not good, and then that he also brings exposure and brings things to light and brings justice to some of the corruption and things that are going on. Lot that we need to be praying about. There's 2 years of pent up groaning, of wicked rule that I think should drive us to our knees. That should say, God, we're still interceding for this land. We still believe you have a plan for America. And we are going to pray. We're going to pray and vote. We're going to pray and vote. And I think as much as you can encourage other Christians that you have influence with, people in your church, your pastors, just be talking about it. It's a great thing to encourage the body at this point. The next point, I'm just looking through my notes here, is that, yes, this is my last point. I just want to make sure. Final point: if we are exiles in Babylon, we need to serve and point to God. I talked about being fruitful and multiplying, storing up treasures in heaven. Whenever possible, cut ties to things that are anti-things of God. Vote and pray and vote. And then if we are indeed exiles in Babylon, continue to serve and point to God. Daniel chapter 1, this is verses 8 and 9, and also verse 15. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Verse 15, and at the end of 10 days they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. Why am I mentioning this? Well, Daniel was exiled in Babylon, carried in as the nation of Israel is brought there, and he lives in captivity in this place, not his homeland. But he did not embrace this pagan culture that was around him. He held on to godly truth. And he was rewarded by God. He's given favor even among the pagans. Talking about this verse, talking about the royal food and the wine that these men who were brought in to serve the king, that it would defile himself as an Israelite, as a Jew, to partake of those things. And he said, let me and my fellow Jewish cohorts, let us, eat this other food. It's kind of the Daniel fast, I believe they talk about it. And they eat this other stuff. They abstain from the royal food that would have brought them, would have made them defiled and unclean. And they come out of this time looking healthier and better nourished than those that partook of the food in the kingdom. God gives them favor in that place. He gives them favor for not bowing the knee to a lesser thing. And you might think, well, that seems like a small thing to not just go along with. But Daniel knew in his heart it was wrong, and he wasn't going to do it. And also, you look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, same thing. They're not bowing down. They're literally not bowing down to the idols of their culture. And they took a stand for God. And that was a means to point others, including the king himself, Nebuchadnezzar, point him to God. So serve and point to God in the place that you're in, even in being in a land that is pagan. We don't hide from the culture, but we don't get defiled by it either. And I've talked about this a little bit before with the church. This has been where our biggest struggle has occurred in recent years. Was in this Praying for America podcast that I did a couple of weeks ago. We've either been too afraid to engage the culture because we're looking at it as being too risky, and what if we do defile ourselves or fall into something that we shouldn't be doing? Or we've gone the other spectrum and said we're going all in with the culture because we want to make this message something that they're able to absorb and accept, and make it more appealing by watering it down. Kind of those two approaches that we've wavered between. I think there's a way to do this that is akin to a Daniel type of approach, in that when paganism truly comes up against the message of Christ, it shrinks back and it loses every time because it has nothing to offer. It has no real power. There's no power to transform or change anything for the good or for the better. And it only leaves society more hurting and more broken. Jesus is the answer. Jesus is King. And if we are truly entering a time in which as a whole, the Christian faith and focus and influence is in a decline, it will come with a resurgent as believers settle in for the long haul, the long game, that we count the cost, we are deliberate to raise godly kids and families, we stay true to his word, and we outlive and we outlast the evil of this age. Because I've talked about it before on my blog, evil has a shelf life. There's a point at which God says no more. And it will end. Satan's time only is so long. And God has prevailed before he will prevail again. And hoping that as I close out this today, this is making sense to you, it's resonating. I'd love to hear from you a little bit of feedback, to know, are these messages, the Living Behind Enemy Lines series, the World on Fire, the Praying for America, are those in line with anything else that you've heard in recent weeks and months? If so, I hope it affirms what you've already been hearing and receiving and reading. But if not, is this message an outlier and out of step with other things right now? And I'm just asking that honestly just for my own feedback. I ask namely to challenge anyone who might be skeptical at this point about the battle and about the call and about the response on our part as believers. Because if we're not on the same page, is there some prayer and further consideration that should take place? I do take seriously the means to post these things and share about these things, and the platform that God's given me, the ability to do this, isn't something that I take lightly. I pray over these messages every time before I hit record to say, God, help me to speak this in a way that you want me to and brings you glory. And so I hope as he's doing that, as he's leading me, as he's giving me the words to speak and the verses to mention and the points to elaborate on, that it's doing something as a person's receiving it on the other end. And I don't say any of that to challenge anybody. I honestly would love to hear what you've been hearing. And if it resonates with that, great. If it doesn't, why? And that just helps me to kind of just keep moving forward as I continue to plan and prepare messages and podcasts and episodes. Above all, I thank you for listening. Hopefully, it's encouraging for you. I want to do that with this As Bold as Lions platform. That's my goal. And as always, I love you guys. I love walking this journey with you. And again, this episode and the other two in this series, please share with somebody if they're something that you've benefited from and think somebody else would as well. Not sure where we're going next. Still figuring that out, but I hope you'll stick with me and come back again. And I hope that you're blessed as you go throughout your day and your week whenever you are receiving this. I will leave you with Ephesians 5:15 through 17, as I always do. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you again soon.